Welcome, welcome. We are back to the Big Money Stylist podcast, and we have had some changes in the Big Money Stylist program. If you are new to this podcast, I'm a hairstylist. My name is Danielle K. White. I created a hair extension method called Natural Beaded Rows Extensions, which is kind of a hand-tied method that's trending in the marketplace. All of our classes are completely sold out for 2018, but we'll be releasing more dates soon. In December, I own a salon in Laguna Beach, California called DKW Styling, and I'm currently wearing Natural Beaded Rows.
Natural Beaded Rows.
And today I have a special guest.
Actually,
if you go back and listen to some of our original podcasts, I think we're on like episode number 37, 38.
Yeah, we're on episode 39, maybe, I believe. But,
I can't remember.
But I was in the first 15.
You were only in the first 4.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
But this is my husband and partner in crime. This is Mr. Garrett J. White.
Around the world that I have been leading here for the past since 2012. My wife and I co-train in that. And then I've also came over to the Big Money Stylist Training Game, which was part of my birth child with Danielle in creating a system to train and educate hairstylists from behind the chair to leave the game of slavery and enter a game of possibility.
You know what's so funny? I remember when you actually named the Natural Beaded Rows Education Big Money Stylist, and I was like, oh my God, Big Money
You hated it.
I hated it. And I still, now it's just like, I'm like, whatever. And our artists usually call it BMS. But it's funny because in the beginning, when I was teaching, I've been teaching for the last 7-8 years, and it's interesting my passion has always been sharing MBR because I saw what it did for me in my career behind the chair, and I was like, oh my God, I'm making great money. I can still be a mom. I'm working this is amazing. And I feel like I was making great money. And when I would talk to other women, I remember at the time when I was creating my brand, and I'm just going to share the story really quick. There was a mom who was divorced, who had 4 kids, and literally I'd watch her clients, she'd work so hard every day, 9 to 7 every day, and it was just her clients were in, the color was pre-mixed, and it was just it wasn't even for me, I was she doesn't even look like she's having fun anymore. It's totally become a job. Plus, I'm tripling what she's making in 3 days a week and half the time, less than half the time. And it was in that moment, when I started my brand, I was like, oh my God, this is such a great tool. And it's a system of hair extensions, which I feel like I had created over years and years and years of experience of trial and error on my own hair of tons of different systems, and kind of came up with a unique way of the beaded row system. And I called it Natural Beaded Rows. But that's what our education was in the beginning, was just me teaching MBR. And I would get so sad when I would teach it, and I felt like people, I think I discredited how much I had gone through and how much I had learned even better money, and realized that the importance of, I don't know, just creating a brand and everything. And that's when Big Money Stylist came along, because I couldn't just giving people the tool of MBR wasn't getting it done anymore.
Well, if you go back to what was actually happening, I was watching this as an outsider, watching Danielle, an outsider and insider, because I'm at home with her all the time, getting to hear both sides of the equation. I was actually there doing the video of the very first training course that you did in 2010. I was running the camera. I was a cameraman. And that was actually the very first time you did the education. It was 7 or 8 girls that came together for Natural Beaded Rows. It was a salon in Sandy, Utah, with a woman who you were actually very good friends with, who, you guys had a little marijuana moment in the parking lot at one time. We won't go to the marijuana moment in the parking lot hotboxing in Salt Lake City, Utah. All right. So, but here was it. I love you, Jen. I love you, Jen. Hashtag we love Jen. Have you talked to Jen in a while?
No, I follow her. She's a cute girl.
I don't think we'd talk. I haven't had a conversation with Jen or her husband in probably 7, 8 years, 6 years.
They're fine.
Super amazing people. So, anyways, what I watched happen though was you saw NBR. Somebody would come to the class. And
and not only that, they became they so hateful towards me. And I was like, oh my God, my intention was not to give you this tool to be hey, go fuck everybody over. Hey, I'm just this isn't real. You know what I mean? I'm I wear the own product. 100% of my clientele is wearing this product. I'm teaching right now. If it wasn't working, I wouldn't be doing this. Because people, even to this day, they're it's a scam. I'm oh my God. And so for me, I would get so sad. And I had to, for years, I felt so alone. And people just in my ear, just being total douchebags. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Who do you think you are? Self-proclaimed educator. Because now there's tons of educators in the scene. People build a following on Instagram, and all of a sudden they're I'm an educator, and you're cool. And for me, I felt like I was one of the beginning. It was right when social media, at least with Instagram, got going, and that's when I launched my brand.
Instagram wasn't even a game.
It wasn't
when you started.
No,
it didn't
it
even
wasn't.
exist.
And it's called Natural Beaded Rows, and here's what it is. And that's kind of how I started. But there was a good 2 years where I just felt like people were just really douchey. And it was hard, but I knew when I first and I share this story all the time, when I very first started my brand, like there was this moment when I was like editing my videos and I was like, who the fuck do you think you are? And then this overwhelming sense of love just hit me. And it was like, no, you have no idea how many people this will impact. And in that moment, like I'm a very visual person. Like I saw like masses of stylists and I was like, okay, it's not about me anymore. I just need to go. I need to like embrace this feeling I'm having. And to this day, like
why individuals end up doing that. You know, why do they talk shit when they could just embrace? You know, why do they steal? Why do they loot? Why do they plunder? Why do human beings do these things, particularly in the hair industry, now having been around it now for 15 years, 16 years with Danielle, but then be actively involved last 2 years in the Big Money Stylist program. We sold out all of the programs in 2018. Every 2-day intensive, we have 25 students, $4,000 a ticket, sold out. Both of our 350 artist events, two 3-day events that happened at the end of 2018, sold out. And we have a waiting list of over 1,200 artists, maybe just like you listening, wanting to get into classes in 2019. Now, people ask why the classes are having so much success. I'm going to tell you right now, it's stories in the marketplace about social numbers. Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about this before, but I want you to hit on it because part of what I've seen happen with artists, now 1,000+ artists that have come through our programs, and I've been able to have personal conversation with hundreds of them. And then I watch the networks of our mastermind with 350+ women in it right now with our 7 coaches. And I see it over and over again, which is this story that I have to communicate the number of tens of thousands of followers on Instagram, tens of thousands of followers on my blog, tens of thousands of followers equals cash.
It does not.
Speak about this for a second and why this is actually what we found this to be as inaccurate.
Like I said, like even in the beginning when I first started my brand, like the Instagram didn't really exist. And I, in the beginning, started having like clients and people fly out to me even in the very beginning. And it was any 400,000 followers. And you hear what they charge for a color correction and you're like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah.
And you're like, really? Like, so it doesn't matter. Even you can have like so many followers, but if your dollars per hour doesn't equal what you should be making, then like, what is the point? Like, then you're just like mass producing and like creating, I don't know. Like, I never really understood
I think everybody's getting it. What ends up happening in the social media space is you have people believe that actually having a whole lot of people like you or heart you actually equals cash. Right, and it's a form of communication to put your content out there, and you could take half-naked pictures of yourself and put them on Instagram, and you get a whole bunch of guys named Harry or steal my wife's work off of her Instagram and repost it as their own, claiming it's their work. Regardless of what you do, there's actually another form of communication we have to talk about. And it's the inability that artists have to actually powerfully communicate with their clients. Let's go there. You were talking to me about color correction.
Yes.
Go with it.
So I saw a post on social media on one of the big Instagram accounts, and it was like somebody justifying their cost so that the clients could see it. And they were like saying like, okay, the toner was this, and the foils was this, and the overall and they like listed all the cart, all the things, and they're like, this equaled $395. And to me, the energy behind this post was like. See,
needy.
This is neat. Well, it was just like, see, this is why we have to charge what we do because we did so much. But in my experience, you shouldn't have to feel guilty or say that you have to give your clients it should be known before you start the conversation, or before you start the appointment. Like, you shouldn't ever be checking a client out and be like, I'm sorry, here's. But, sometimes stylists get lazy and they're just talking about strategic placement of 1 or 2 foils, and that's great. Sometimes you don't need a full head balayage or a full head foil, but sometimes you do. And I would say twice a year, everybody needs a color correction. But they don't communicate that to their clients, and so there's times where they even get a new client that sits in the chair and their hair is like, we call it blorange.
Blorange.
Blorange. It's red orange, blonde orange, whatever you want to call it. And they're just like, I pull red. And you're like, oh my God, you don't pull red. You need a color correction. You have to lift all this pigment out and deposit over so you don't look red. But anyway, so you have somebody that sits in your chair and their hair is like, it needs. What did I commit to. And then you're battling in your mind, like, how am I going to tell her, like, this is a $400 appointment. This is not your regular $200 appointment. I mean, it's double. It's double the work. It's double the time. It's just stressful. And it should be tripled. You honestly, a color correction should be, like, if you charge $200 for a color correction should be $650 at least.
Okay, so why is this such a struggle to actually deal with this?
Because so if you go into an appointment and you tell the client, like, sweetie, you need a color correction, and you're like, it's $650, they're immediately going to be like, what the fuck? I just came in for a $200 touch-up. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's building that trust and that communication and owning that you're the expert. And so it's like sitting a client down and like explaining. For me, like if that's the situation, I tell them, I'm like, listen, we need to completely lift this out or whatnot, but it's the best result for me to feel like I'm giving you exactly what you want.
Right.
This is what we need to do. And sometimes they even communicate, and you know what? It might take a couple times because there's people that want to go like blonde overnight. And it's important to communicate that as well. Like, hey, this is a color correction, and you might need like 2 back-to-back color corrections. And just communicating that, because you can't, we get in our heads as stylists and think like, oh, my client's a crazy bitch. But like if you just lay out the facts and you say this is what it is, then they're more likely to be like, okay, yes or no. But the hard part for me is like if a client's like, well, I wasn't anticipating paying that much, and then I'll just go with 30. It's hard to control your art based on a number. So somebody like wants this and you know how to give it to them, but you also know it's going to be a lot of work. So then you have to go with plan B, and you're like, well, is plan B going to look as good as plan A? Do you know what I mean? How do you know when to
go with the plan B in that situation versus communicating strongly to a plan A?
If I have a client that's like literally is like, so like I can't do it, I don't want to do it, I'm like, great, then here's what we're gonna do, but just know in 6 weeks you're gonna still fade out a little bit red orange. Like if you want the best results. So I not only do I tell them what we can do, what'll look good, but I also try to communicate the outcome of like, I get it, you're trying to fix a problem, but you need to do this to fix the problem. So I can do this and it's going to look good, but I also need you to understand in 6 weeks when you fade out a little bit red, here is why. And it seems exhausting, but that's also too why we do a lot of phone consultations and we try to really like go over the expectations about communication. And it's hard because I think stylists get too in their head, like, oh my God. And for me, I tell stylists, I'm like, don't think about the number maybe at that moment. Just really work on communicating what you want the end result to be and pretend like you're talking to a friend. Like, you know, like just communicate with them like, here's what's best. I'm the expert. Here's what we're going to do. And a lot of times, I feel like if you're marketing yourself to be like a great stylist, people come in knowing that and they trust you and they're like, okay, I've seen your work. Let's do it. Okay, green light. Let's go. So
inside the game of what Danielle's speaking to, what we're talking about is framing. Right, so in sales, persuasion, influence, what we're discussing is framing of a client, framing of a situation. Right now, framing is not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a reality when it comes to seduction and it comes to assisting people to make better decisions. So if you look at Natural Beaded Rows, and we've seen this, I watched this happen in hot seats over and over every week inside the big. Even though we said everything is sold out, I would encourage you to head to bigmoneystylist.com. Make sure that you have completed an application for an upcoming event because we are releasing the 1st of November the first round of tickets for our next intensives that open up in the spring of 2019. So if that's you, head to bigmoneystylist.com, put your email address in, watch a short video after this podcast, and complete that application, and we will notify you when the new classes are available. So this idea of framing, though, is the ability to put a particular story around the way that someone is seeing. You can look at it like putting a pair of sunglasses on. Right, a client comes to you, they're used to paying X, Y, and Z, $200, $300. They have a pair of glasses on that says, I don't pay more than $300. So Natural Beaded Rows is beautiful because we tend to only hear this. I only hear this from our artists who have not fully converted to the Natural Beader. This problem dealing with the pricing completely goes away. Speak about why that is the case.
It's so funny because I feel like anything, if you have a niche or a specialty, you can get away with charging a little bit more. But
you better say that one more time. When you have
a niche or a specialty, you can get away with charging a little bit more.
Say that a third time just for the cheap seats and everyone whose noses are bleeding way high up in the stadium.
If you have a niche or a specialty, you can get away with charging a little bit more, and part of it is because you're an expert in that niche.
Beautiful. And the expertise puts a different frame. What it creates for the individual looking to buy from you is price elasticity. This means that our story about what we're going to pay for something actually opens up and becomes something bigger because of the new frame. So Natural Beaded Rows immediately puts a frame on someone or a story that says, hey, listen, you're coming to an NBR-only salon. We do not do men's cuts, kids' cuts. We don't do color correction. Very odd time.
No, we do it if they're getting extensions.
Okay, but we don't just do standoff color correction without NBR. This maybe happens once a month, maybe once every 2 months.
No, we do a lot of color corrections. We do
without NBR.
No, with that, no.
That's what I mean, though. We don't just do color. We do shitloads of color correction in the salon,
NBR,
only with NBR. But we don't just do color correction by itself.
People come in all the time and they're like, oh, I've seen your guys' work. I want to get my color. And I'm like, would you like to get extensions with that? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, we only offer it if you are getting extensions with it.
I like it. That's like a McDonald's. Would you like an NBR with that? Would you like to add NBR to your color correction? No. Okay, good. Well, through the line you go.
It is not like a McDonald's.
Well, here's the thing, too. I want you to look at is, like, take, for example, Bentley. Danielle has a Bentley SUV. It's amazing, right? When we go to buy this vehicle, like, the vehicle's like $250,000. And when you go to Bentley doesn't give you an itemized list about why the car is $250,000.
Because it's a fucking Bentley.
They're like, it's a fucking Bentley. Which part of this is, too, is that when we check out with the vehicle, and it was the same with my G-Wagon, it's the same with my Bentley or my Lambo. It's been the same with Hyatt. Same thing with Chanel bags. Same thing with, like, Hermès, whatever it is you're dealing. When you start to deal with a higher level product,
you don't ask.
You don't ask, number one. And number two, the actual producer of the value doesn't tell you. Then they add on services all the time. Like I buy $6,000-$7,000 insurance policies on the wheel sets of the vehicles, and it's an easy upsell when you're dealing with a $250,000 to $500,000 car. Because all of a sudden they're saying, hey, listen, and I know some of you are listening to this and you're like, oh my God, this guy's a prick, he's an asshole, he's talking about these very expensive vehicles. Natural Beaded Rows is the Bentley, the Lambo of the hair game. Like it's not so when you're dealing with high-end services, you've eliminated 90% of the marketplace or more. Let them go somewhere else. When we talk about Natural Beaded Rows, we're talking about a luxury individuals who feel luxurious about themselves. And inside of doing this, it changes the way that people see themselves, and it also changes the way the pricing goes. But this still doesn't eliminate our problem with conversation. So let's go to this place of communication, because you and I were talking about this before the show today, about how artists do not powerfully communicate with their clients.
One of the things that I'll see, too, from a lot of students is they come in and they're like, oh, well, I live in a small town, Danielle. How would you suggest I go about my pricing when I live in a small town? And it's so funny because we lived in a small town in Arizona, and it was Gilbert, Arizona. And now I know it, like people they're like, Gilbert's up and coming. I'm like, great. When we lived there, it literally was next to a cow farm. We were clearing the fuck out there. Like you lost service. Like it was very like remote. So that being said, like it was a tiny space. Like I remember when I started there, I opened a little salon spa studio suite, and I remember even a colorist, I'd be like, what are you guys charging for, like a full cut and color? And they were like, oh, like $95. I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, I was making more in Salt Lake City than that. I'm definitely not charging that. And they would just would kind of frown upon me and be like, well, you can't charge more. That's the going rate for out here kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, not from here. Don't give a shit. And so I kind of went in with that attitude of like, no, I think I'm worth more. And I would rather push with having the niche of hair extensions. I knew myself, I was traveling back to Utah to have my hair done.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, if I'm willing to jump on a flight every couple months and have my hair done, because I know how I like it, I know like these extensions work, because at the time my sister was doing them in Utah. I'm like, if I'm willing to jump on a flight, like I guarantee you there's a lot of other women willing to travel as well. So instead of being worried about the cap and where I lived and people telling me I can't do this and listening to that, I was like, well, screw it. And I just decided to see what else was out there and try to push my brand bigger. And ultimately, what's interesting, that's what I've always had, I've always liked nice things and good experiences, even when we didn't have a ton of money. Like I really, I could see something and I could see the value in it, and I love the experience and everything else. And so I thought of that when I was starting my brand. I was like, that is where the direction I want to go is. I want to be able to offer clients something that is like an experience. I want to be able to have if they're flying in, have them feel like they're very well taken care of, And in the beginning, even when it was just me, I still tried to make them feel very, like, it sounds cheesy, but like special. Like everything I tried to do, I just wanted them to feel like I'm putting my all into it, and creating an experience and giving them an amazing outcome. And when I saw women leaving and their just whole countenance would change, I was like, yeah, this is fucking worth what I'm charging. And it just, for me, like, I was like, I think at the time I was like, I could be charging more. Like, these women are flying in and it's on fire. Like, this is, it's a feeling. Like, you're delivering them a feeling and an experience that who knows where else that can manifest in their lives, with their marriage, their kids, their overall work, like whatever it is. And so to me, I always say this all the time, I'm like, it's always been more than just hair. It always has. And for me, like, seeing that women change and feel that confidence and feel sexy and whatever, like, to me, I'm like, that's so cool.
This is the big difference, and this is the big change that we see constantly over and over and over again. I go into our own salon and I speak with our clients that come in. I was just having this conversation last week with a woman sitting in our chair. Our children go to our school, our kids' school, and she was sitting there. I'd never met her before, and we started having a conversation. She was getting her hair done by Ian, and I said, what brought you in the salon? And she's like, I just want, I've had extensions before, but I wanted to, I just wanted the best ones. I said, well, welcome. We kept having a conversation, and what it ended up with was the reason she was so excited, and I saw stages of it. I came and I saw the salon like an hour and a half. I came back later, and then at the very end, I was there with her after pictures. And I was looking at her, and I said, you feel sexier, yes or no? She's like, yes. And I said, and that's sexy, like, is it radiating for you? Can you feel this? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, I can see it. Like, it's very clear. I said, did you text your husband about date night tonight? She's like, oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm going out for drinks with my girls, and then my husband is meeting me up for a rendezvous. And this woman's in her 40s. And loving the reality of feeling beautiful. And NBR is a feeling. And when you move away from being a commodity inside of the hair game, where you're a slave to the Walmart-style hair services, which I have no problem with Walmart. I have no problem with Walmart-style hair services. There are plenty of people to supply them. But here at BMS and inside of DKW, that's just not what we do. The entire angle is to give women an elite experience, but that communication begins at the very, very, very beginning.
Well, and even down to my marketing, I'm communicating that this is like a higher end service. And even in the beginning, I remember people are like, oh, they're just tracks. Because like the big trending thing was tapes or any kind of single bonded ones. And everyone's like, oh, that's just like an old school track. And people still give me shit to this day. They're like, you didn't create that. That's just a track. It's been around forever. And I'm like, fuck you, because I took a ton of different stuff, combined it together, and created my own thing. So like nobody that I know, and I've been to a shit ton of education, is doing it like this. So regardless, if you think I copied somebody else, I created a bunch of stuff, and that's created my foundation.
Well, and the sequence of it obviously works.
But anyways, the thing is like, I just, even in the very beginning, like when people would tell me like, oh, it's just a track, it's just a row, and I was like, you know what though, like my color's on point, like the cut's on point, the experience the client is having, down to like how I do the consultations, like I knew it was kind of a system that worked and clients were liking it. And I knew that in my industry, extensions were always looked at so poorly. I remember when I even went into hair, and I told my sister, who's a little bit longer than me and she was older than me, and I said, hey, I think I'm going to do extensions. She's like, oh God, no, don't do those. They're so bad. There's no good ones. Like, I've never ever seen anybody with good extensions. And that was like the expectation in our industry for extensions, was like shitty ones. So the fact that I was like, no, I want to wear these in my hair and I want them to look natural, was like that was unheard of in our industry. Like people even settled for just having shitty extensions, and they're just like, oh, they were just happy to have hair. And that's what's so crazy. Like, even giving them a little extra hair, even though it didn't blend, gave them so much confidence.
Even like, you got like triple layers.
I mean, you're like, oh my God, but they're like, oh, I love I'm like, you can see those all over your head. But I don't know where I'm going with this.
I know exactly where we're going with this. Listen, communication itself equals cash. So you can be sitting here all over day. Now, we have our topics every show. We have our first one in the idea of power. Then it goes to production. Today we're on profit. And your profit, or your cash, is directly linked to your, and that starts from your very first images, videos, and or audios that somebody consumes of you on the way to your chair. The conversation of power inside of a frame of elite services exists when the client's in the chair, but they've already moved themselves into that place, which means pricing and communication becomes simpler, because you've been communicating the value of the elite service you've been offering from the very beginning. It's eliminated people who are not there, and it has attracted people who are. And if you'd like to learn more about how these systems work and how we train our artists not only to work 3 days a week, pushing anywhere between $100,000 to $200,000 a year, obviously those results are not guaranteed. We cannot guarantee you shit, because most hairstylists suck. and they don't work, and they're more committed to being a slave. But that's probably not you. So if you're listening to the show and you know you're sick and tired of being with the rest of those yahoos, and you'd like to make a step across, we'd invite you to head on over to bigmoneystylist.com. Complete an application right now. Yes, we are sold in November, seats for 2019, and we'd love you to have one of them. So Danielle, final thoughts here on communication as we wrap up today's show.
I just think it's important to do your art with integrity. Like, I try not to overthink it, or people will tell me, like, all the time, like, I feel like I'm good at sales, but it's not because I'm trying to sell somebody something.
Right.
I'm literally like, oh my God, I'm like so passionate and excited about it, and just sharing the facts and the passion and the vision. And I'm like, wow. And that's what people buy, and that's what people like about me, I think, is I'm just like, but I try to be super authentic, and I try to be very genuine, but I also know that I'm very good at what I am. And so I try to like own all those qualities when I am communicating a message, or even like saying, okay, here's what the price is going to be, and being like super clear so that clients, because I think what happens in our industry, and I'll just kind of touch on this final thought, is like clients will go to the checkout and they're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God, why am I paying for this? And so like even women on fire, and then when they don't want them to leave and feel like I just got fucked over. And so it's important to have that communication with your client, like, hey, you need to let me do your art, and also here's like, this is going to be the pricing as well. So it's like a relationship based on communication that goes both ways. And then when you build that trust with clients, even though every time a client steps in, they're like, I trust you, do whatever, I'll still tell them, I'm like, you need 5 new pieces of hair, okay? And they're like, okay, I trust you. I still tell them that, even to this,
right.
Even the level of where I'm at, I'll be like, hey, I'm halfway in the color. I'm like, this ended up being a color correction, but oh my God, it's gonna look good. And they're like,
yes.
Oh, and I'm like, as I'm mixing and I'm painting and everything, I'm like, your color is gonna be so fucking hot right now. And like, I'm excited, but I'm not like selling. I'm like, I'm so pumped. I'm like so excited. But I also am like, this is a color correction, but girl, you're gonna thank me, okay? Like your hair needed this. We're gonna say a prayer for your hair. Like I make it like that's just like artists, like be authentic, like. Make sure you're communicating, but be excited about it. Be excited about the art that you're delivering and the experience that you're delivering. And then when they walk out, it's kind of like you framed it and you've told them halfway through the appointment, like, it's a color correction. Hey, P.S., you need 5 pieces. So then when they check out, they're not like, fuck, that was an extra $1,000 today. Like, they're like, ooh, like it stings a little bit. That like I'll have clients all the time like, whoo, and I'm like, your hair is so good, and they're like, I know, I love you. Here's my card, I love you. Like, and they don't care. Like they're kind of like, oh, that was a lot of money, but they don't care because they feel amazing, and I communicated a message before they got to the checkout. So I would just encourage all of you stylists, like, create clear communication. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that window of that first consultation when they sit in your chair, because sometimes you can like fuck up the energy of the appointment. And sometimes if you like talk too much, then the client's like, oh, and it gets all weird. So sometimes you just have to like trust yourself and go. And then as you're like talking to them, getting them comfortable, everything, then, I don't know, my experience, I feel like that's a good way to kind of like communicate with the client, but also give them an amazing experience. So you can tell I'm like excited just talking about it. Like I'm just
pumped.
I'm just like pumped, and I'm
super pumped,
rambling because it's like I like.
Hey, you're pumped.
I'm pumped. I like women feeling. I like people letting me do my art, and I like women feeling beautiful. So
if you're an artist who would like to also enjoy more of the art that you do, because the money that you make supports the value, and you are into the game of heading down the path with us here at BMS and the NBR experience in the NBR tribe, head on over to bigmoneystylist.com and complete an application today for a release of classes happening in certification in 2019. That's all we got for this week. We'll see you next week when we come back with the topic of protection. Again, culminating here on our 4-part round robin as we roll back to the top left inside the show, the founder and creator of Natural Beaded Rows. We'll both see you guys next week.